hospital to hospitality.
There's not a lot of good ones out there, which, I think a lot of women would use that phrase to describe men in the dating pool.
Commerce.
When there's two heads, do they swim in opposite directions?
Hi, hello, welcome back to The Worried Well, where we worry about your health and wellness future. This is Ariana.
It's Emily. Here in Brooklyn.
Hi, and this is Susanna.
Producer Paul's also here. I always have to introduce him. Today, we cover the nuts and bolts of male fertility. The streets are saying your T is low and your sperm is slow, and the count's abysmal. What can you do about it? Joining us is the founder of Legacy, Khaled Kataly, who's here to chat about male fertility and how Legacy is revolutionizing sperm testing and freezing by bringing it into the comfort of your home.
Sperm is trending, and I don't just mean that in a Reddit type of way, but in a data-based billion-dollar startup type of way. We've been told for decades that fertility is a woman's responsibility, but we know that that is simply not true. Fertility is a partnership. So our guest today, Khaled Kataly, founder of Legacy. We're so happy you're with us. I'll just list off some of your accolades. You are a prior World Economic Forum fellow, a Harvard grad, and famously the plaintiff in a hot coffee debacle in Canada. And today he has graciously joined us to talk about building a company around a biological taboo. I don't think people are super comfortable talking about sperm health and male fertility. That's kind of like the realm of women. But I think, we're so interested to learn how you're disrupting that and how you've grown this into the nation, all of North America's largest male fertility company. So today we're talking about what sperm does about your health, aging, wellness, and why freezing it might just be the most responsible thing you should be doing in your 20s and 30s. Maybe also, when you're 18. If you're a guy who has thought about being a dad someday, or you love someone who is thinking of becoming a dad, this episode is for you.
Great. Super excited to have you. Let's just kick right off. So can you tell us a little bit about the moment you realized that working in sperm was your calling?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you all. And, Emily, you said something earlier, which is we've been told that fertility is a woman's responsibility when it really is a partnership. And I think you really hit the nail on the head there, and excited to chat more about that. You asked me, when did I know that sperm was going to be the world that I live in? And actually, as I look above my computer screen, we have a huge Save Our Sperm, SOS, neon light in yellow that we've had at some of our events. And so obviously it's become a big part of my life. Believe it or not, when I was 13 years old, I wanted to be a soccer player. I think I had very different ambitions. But then again, people want to be a soccer player, then end up doing B2B SaaS. In my case, it was very much driven by a personal experience. So there are no active lawsuits. I should clarify that. And it was in the US, not in Canada. But there was a very, very painful experience from my life in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was probably a decade ago at this point, but I'm on a consulting project. It's early in the morning. We're driving to the client site. We stop by to pick up a few cups of coffee and tea along the way. And I'm the most junior person on the team. So I offer, I say, hey, you know what? Let me jump out and grab it. So jump out to the Starbucks, get 3 hot coffees, 1 hot tea. And when I say hot, I mean, freshly brewed. And when I say freshly brewed, I mean boiling hot. And they give me one of those cardboard cup holders, when you have more than one drink. And so I jump back into the car. I'm in the passenger seat. I'm holding that cardboard cup holder with the 4 scalding hot beverages right on my lap as we drive down the highways of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, a car in front of us stops very suddenly, which forces us to stop very suddenly. And you don't need a physics degree to know that the laws of inertia are going to cause all kinds of movement. What ends up happening is those 4 very hot scalding beverages spill all over my lap. I got second-degree burns. I was in a full suit and tie at that point. And the fabric of the suit actually was absorbing the hot liquid, making it even more painful. It ripped the skin clean off my thighs. I got second-degree burns. I jumped out of the car. I was in agony, taken to the ER. I was hospitalized for a while. I could not wear normal pants for a month and a half. That's how painful it was.
Wow.
And, I always knew that I wanted to be a dad from a pretty young age, or at least I always hoped that I would be. And back in 2014, I'm 36 now, so I must have been, 26, 25, something in that range. And I had this moment like, oh my God, imagine there had been some permanent damage, right? And so thankfully, second-degree burns do heal fully. But I just had this moment, this very salient moment of like, imagine something had happened that meant that I would have to tell every future partner that, hey, I cannot give you the children that you want. And then even for myself, I would not be able to have the family that I would want. And it's around this time that I start my master's at Harvard. I moved to Boston. This was maybe a couple months later, so it wasn't a long timeline. That actually was my last consulting project. I was wrapping up my time there. So I make the move to Boston. I'm in orientation, and I meet this guy from Oman who says to me, who just happens to be talking about the fact that he had gone through cancer, he had had prostate cancer, he'd gone through chemotherapy, and he says to me, I froze my sperm before starting chemotherapy. Interesting. I had never heard of sperm freezing before. And so I asked him, what is sperm freezing? He's like, well, chemotherapy is really harmful to your body. Radiation can make you infertile. So I just had to go through this process. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you do it? Do you need permission from anyone? He's like, no, I think you can just kind of just do it. And so I looked up local sperm bank in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I found the local sperm bank, which, by the way, was right next door to my favorite Chinese restaurant. So I'm walking in, and like the smells of sesame chicken, and kung pao chicken are kind of wafting out the restaurant, which frankly put me in the mood. So I walk in, and I remember very vividly that reception room because, first of all, it's small. Second of all, there's about 4 couples sitting there, right? All of whom are in some version or some stage of, fertility preservation or fertility journey or something. And so everyone's kind of just like hiding their face, right? Nobody wants to make eye contact. I, of course, walked in and made eye contact with everyone. So I walk into the receptionist, who then hands me some forms. She does this all day, right? Excuse me, sir, when's the last time you had sex with a man? And I'm like, I don't think recently. She's like, okay, great. And do you currently have cancer? I'm like, I don't think so. And she's like, okay. And are you planning to transition to become a woman? I'm like, I don't think so. And she's like, okay, well then why are you here?
Crazy.
She looks at me like she looks at me like I'm crazy. She's like, are you getting a vasectomy? Like, what's going on? I'm like, no, I just think it's a good idea. She's like, all right, weirdo. So hands me a cup, takes me to a room. The room is, kind of the size of a large cupboard. There's a black leather couch, there's a table with some sticky porn magazines on it. You can turn the TV on, but many folks who've been to clinics will tell you that when you turn the TV on, it's still showing the scene from the person before you, and specifically the scene where they stopped viewing.
No. So you're like in the thrust of it. That sounds terrible.
In the thrust.
I'm in the throes. I'm in the thrusts. I don't know exactly what I'm in. All I know is that I'm in for an experience.
You want to go home.
And the woman says to me, you have about 10 minutes. We're running a little bit behind today. So if you don't mind.
Like chop.
Yeah, kind of like chop, rub, and, and she says it's very matter of fact. And so, you get in there, you kind of try to get in the mood. You turn off the light, but guess what? You can still see light coming in from the bottom of the door. You can see the shadows of people as they walk by. You can hear everybody going about their day. And you're imagining every bare, hairy ass that has been in and around that room.
Hot.
That'll do it.
Great. I hope that it was a visual enough picture for you all. And so, I did my thing. First of all, they only refer to your sperm as the specimen, which somehow made it creepier. I don't know why. Sir, when you're done, you can just put the specimen on the tray.
Sorry, what do you guys call it at Legacy? Have you rebranded?
Sperm sample.
Okay.
Sperm sample. Just like, hey, man, do your thing. Give us your sample. And so, I walk out, you put it on the tray, you leave, you don't hear from them for a week. And obviously for a week, you're kind of spiraling because you're imagining every worst possible case scenario. You get your results. And in my case, everything was fine. But
what do they test for?
Yeah. So any fertility clinic will test for what we test for. So you're testing for volume, which is how much semen that comes out. Notably, sperm and semen are not the same thing. Semen is the liquid that comes out. Sperm is what's in the semen. So they test for how much semen you're producing, because too much or too little can be cause for concern. They test for count and concentration. So how many sperm are you producing in your sample? You want that to be 39 million or more. And then what is your concentration per milliliter? Because that kind of is your potency. They will look at your sperm's motility, which is how well they can swim, and specifically their progressive motility, so how many of them are swimming forward. Because obviously if they're swimming backwards, they're not particularly useful. as far as the reproductive tract is concerned. They will also typically look at morphology, so how normal or abnormal your sperm is. Fun fact, the vast, vast majority of your sperm is abnormal. So 2 heads, funky shapes, there's not a lot of good ones out there, which, I think a lot of women would use that phrase to describe men in the dating pool. A lot of abnormalities.
When there's 2 heads, do they swim in opposite directions? Or,
I
like,
actually,
how does
I
that
don't know for a
work?
fact. I just don't think it swims.
It's
I think it kind of
just
flops.
stuck.
Too
there.
heavy.
Anyone?
Flops around.
What was that Pokemon fish that you could always catch? Magikarp. It's like a Magikarp for
Okay.
anyone who has ever played Pokemon. They're just kind of useless and they flop around.
Okay.
And so they'll test for that. Some clinics, we do it, but only about 50 clinics in the US do this. We test for DNA fragmentation. So we can actually test for how much DNA damage there is in your sperm, which is interesting because it's correlated with all kinds of pregnancy outcomes. It's correlated with, miscarriage rates. It's correlated with, genetic conditions in your children like autism spectrum disorder and so on. So that's the kind of stuff that they will test for. And then, of course, some clinics will freeze your sperm. That's the bulk of my business, so that if you need to use the sperm in the future, you can. And so to wrap up that extremely long story about how I masturbated in a small room while, a woman was waiting for me outside, after that experience, I was struck by how profound it felt to know that I could have children someday. They said, great news, your sperm is frozen. No matter what happens to you, right? Let's say you do get cancer. Let's say you do transition to become a woman. Let's say you do get a vasectomy, whatever, you're set. And I couldn't get over the disconnect between how profound it felt to have done it and how uncomfortable I was through that whole experience. And I'm not the kind of person who gets uncomfortable easily, right? As you can imagine from someone who refers to himself as the sperm king and runs a male fertility startup. But that was like a top 5, top 10 moment in my life of extreme discomfort. And this is around the time where companies like Roman and Hims
Right.
had really taken off with this whole idea of like, look, discreet, at home, destigmatized, affordable, well-branded products delivered to your door without you needing to see a doctor. And I just became really fixated on this idea that, hey, if this is affordable, if it's convenient, if the experience end to end is patient-centered, then why wouldn't every guy do this?
Yeah.
That's really what it came down to. This is such a no-brainer. If all you have to do is masturbate at home one time and pay a few $100s, you would be insane not to do it when you are young and healthy. And so,
Yeah.
legacy.
Wow.
I love that story. I also feel like it's a genius name for this type of startup. Like, how did you land on Legacy as a name? Were you like brainstorming with friends? Like, how did that come about?
I wish I remember the moment that it came to me, but I know that it came to me early on because to me, a startup is only real when it has a name. A lot of founders will say the name doesn't matter, but you know what? I think in this world it does.
Definitely.
And as a fun fact, I don't know how far we will want to go down this path, but it's kind of an interesting side quest we can go on. We ended up in a big legal battle with another company that started a few months after us that ripped off our website, ripped off our product, and ripped off our name.
Insane.
So they launched
I'm
this legacy with the
screaming.
same product, the same color scheme, the same company values.
Who hates you? How do they find
But
it?
did they have a product, or it was just marketing?
They were a few months behind us. They started a few months after us, but they had a product. They trademarked the name, and then they came after us for the name. And so anyway, it's a very interesting legal battle. But long story short, for a while I had to, my lawyers were like, look, do you want to waste a ton of money fighting this? And I said, yes, I'm from the Middle East. We love fighting. And so anyway, so for a brief moment, I had to reconcile with what other names I would pick. And so I was like, Dynasty, Heritage, Heritage feels vaguely racist somehow. Dynasty feels a little bit, monopolistic somehow. Legacy feels strong.
Yeah.
And we know that you have with some badass lawyers on your team that we know. So.
Oh, there's some badass lawyers out there, especially those with Middle Eastern attributes.
Exactly. I also love, and I think I heard you talking about this on a different pod, but just, with the website name, it's also like Give Love Legacy and introducing this really interesting idea of, gifting this. I'm actually really curious, how many people are coming to it themselves versus what, our like girlfriends gifting. I'm like, I want to gift this to my partner, like go freeze immediately. But like what percentage, like how does that break down?
My startup founder tech bro friends, of which, I do not identify as such, had told me that we should do get legacy, like get, grab, it's like, it's very, San Francisco. But I always thought that it was, I wanted it to be a bit deeper than that. It's not something you're grabbing off the shelf. It's like you're giving the gift of legacy. You're giving the gift of time. You're giving the gift of family. You're giving the gift of freezing a moment in time to someone you love. And that's why give legacy, despite the fact that I will say it actually is a worse URL to pronounce, get legacy is actually a bit cleaner. I digress. And what we found was that for couples trying to conceive, which is about 30-ish% of my business, half the time it's from the female partner.
Yeah.
If you take a heterosexual couple where they've been trying to conceive, oftentimes it is a female partner who's doing all the research. She's buying the product. It shows up at the door, and the dude calls in and says, "What am I supposed to do? My wife just handed me this kit."
Just backing up a tiny bit, because I'm curious about this, and I think it sets the scene for the rest of this. Is sperm the same as kind of, women's eggs? So does sperm just start declining as we age? Because we see that sperm in general has declined since, 30, 40 years ago in terms of how much, the quality, and, there's actually just general lower counts. So what's happening? What's causing the lower counts? Do men have, can you go a little bit more into that? Because I feel like that's a huge part of what your company does, right?
So let's start high level and then break it down. The world population is collapsing, right? Global birth rates have fallen. Pretty much every developed country has a birth rate that is well below the replacement birth rate, which is 2.1 babies per woman, which is how many babies you need in order to maintain your population size. Right? It's particularly extreme. I think South Korea is somewhere in the 0.9 to 1.0.
Shout out 4B movement.
Japan, I believe, is about 1.3. Even, like Germany and the UK are kind of in the 1.3 to 1.5 range. The US, I believe, is about 1.7. But even that is broken down by demographics, right? So white Americans and non-white Americans actually have very different birth rates. So to start, I think it's so important to contextualize this is part of a broad worldwide issue that is affecting pretty much every country on the planet. The question then becomes, is our fecundity decreasing, which is our ability to actually have children, or is this actually more of a decision by people for socioeconomic or other factors to not have children? And this is where it gets tricky, and nobody fully knows the answer. So I'll start with this side of the equation, which is people are older. People are waiting later to have kids. People are choosing to have less kids. We live in an environment that is frankly kind of hostile to having kids, right? Mm-hmm. They're fucking expensive, right? You typically want to have a couple. And so then you're saying to yourself, okay, well, am I able and willing to pay all this money to have a child and bring them into the world where, by the way, now we all live in studio apartments and one bedrooms and our families aren't around us and we've all moved and we're all living paycheck to paycheck. How am I supposed to afford to bring a child into this world? Mm-hmm. Right. So that is kind of one big part of it. The second is actually there's a lot of interesting discussion right now around societal norms. And actually the Trump administration is doing a lot of work to try to normalize the idea of having children around. Right. Which is actually, it's such an interesting thing that they're doing. Set aside their rationale and reasoning, but you typically don't see children kind of in integrated into our lives the same way you do in other parts of the world. You go to the Middle East, restaurants, it's totally normal to have big families and children and so on. Like here in New York, you have a kid in the restaurant and everyone makes a big stink about it.
Yeah, same in Greece, right? Like children everywhere. They're such a huge part of just dinners. It's totally different. Like
if you are in that 30 to 35 age range and your friends aren't having kids, right, it actually creates this kind of normative expectations around where you should be in your life. Whereas if you're in 30 to 35 and everyone around you is having kids, right, you start to think about it differently. So actually social norms are very powerful here. Is it normatively good or bad to have a family or to have children? So this is kind of part one. The second part is at a biological level, what's going on? Well, first of all, when couples are meeting later and getting married later and choosing to have children later, take a heterosexual couple, you have a less fertile man and a less fertile woman. So that actually increases the likelihood of infertility, which is now affecting 1 in 6 couples globally per the World Health Organization.
Wow.
Right? When I first started in this business, it was like 1 in 8, 1 in 7. And I was like, no, it's 1 in 6. So infertility is not a niche topic. It affects people that you know and people that you love, and may even it will affect one person on this call. Won't be me. Well, actually, you never know. Well, no, you know what? It might be me.
You have 100 vials frozen, so you're good.
I know. No, it probably won't be from me per se, but in the context of a coupling, right? I can't speak on behalf of my partner. Anyhow. And so then you have what's happening at a generational level. Sperm counts are on the decline. So they've gone down about 50 to 60% over the last 40 years. So men are simply producing less sperm. Are they producing enough sperm to have kids? Yes. Right? But they have worse quality sperm. They have less sperm. You're more likely than ever before to face issues trying to conceive. And then you're doing it in the context of an older couple where both of you are older and you're going to have worse fertility outcomes. And so it kind of becomes this, well, in order to solve the major population crisis, there's a lot of policy issues that need to be resolved. There's a lot of social norm issues that need to be resolved. There's the cost of childcare, and there's tax breaks, and there's, normalizing this in society and the way that we talk about it. And then there's the how do we stop the decline, both at a generational level and also as you get older, the decline of fertility. And then I'll add one more thing that is specific to sperm, which is and I'm speaking on behalf of the entire gender here, we think we can have children anytime. And that is technically largely true, but we cannot have healthy children at any time. And that is a very important distinction, because when you hear about Robert De Niro having a kid when he's 79 years old, what you don't hear is that actually the risk of his child having schizophrenia, or having autism, or being bipolar, and the risk of them having a miscarriage, the risk of the wife developing gestational diabetes, the risk of the child having low birth rate or like worse birth scores, all of those are significantly higher when you get older. And that part just kind of gets, tucked underneath the surface.
I consulted our board of dudes in preparation for this podcast. Yeah, we have a board of dudes. Our audience is predominantly female, but we do have like a few men. And some of them are in their late 30s, early 40s. And when I said, hey, we're speaking with this person and it's around male fertility, and, we're learning that the fertility actually declines at 35, 40 in the same way as it does for women, I think everyone was really shocked. Like no one was, I think, even expecting that. And then a lot of the questions that we had were things like, questions for you that we had from them were things like, are my kids going to be like scrambled now that I'm 40? And like, if I have kids, like, after that. And then the other one was like, if I'm 39, like, is it too late for me to freeze my sperm? Like, they were just kind of, I think it really opened a conversation. And that's sort of why I'm so glad we had you on.
There is so much education and awareness that is happening. The average level of male knowledge has increased significantly since when I started the business. When I first started things in 2018, the average guy knew nothing about the topic. Today, the average man now knows that there is something happening around sperm and fertility. They don't know the details. They're not yet driven to act, but there's a level of awareness, and these things move more quickly than we realize. If you take egg freezing, which, by the way, before 2014 was still considered experimental and unsafe by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine.
Wow.
Right? Within 7 to 10 years, it suddenly became extremely normalized among, our communities and probably the communities of your listeners.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well. Like, we're in this really interesting moment in time of kind of like the quantified self and so much optimization. And I think one thing this came across, I learned about this about 2 weeks ago, is this Reddit community called R Cum Stacking. And like, this kind of shocked me, honestly, that there's an entire community, and it's not small. There's 55,000 people in this community.
A lot of cum stackers out there.
Are you in this community?
And all they are doing is sharing tips and tricks on what vitamins to take. Is it the CoQ10? Is it the omega-3 fatty acids, etc., that they should be taking to optimize their load? So, I think as you're saying, the conversation is moving really quickly, and I don't know, I'm visibly seeing this across the internet, and I'm sure, you're much more aware of it as well. But I do think that we're at this really interesting, critical juncture, I think, and we're going to see massive. I mean, you're probably already seeing massive uptake, but yeah.
We're already seeing it even in our own customer base. The percentage of people who identified as biohackers has tripled in the past year and a half. These are people who kind of just want to do a sperm test, so they learn about their semen parameters. They recognize that your sperm actually says a lot about your overall health. It's associated with all kinds of, it's a biomarker for your general health, right? So it's predictive of things like how long you will live, how likely you are to die. It is predictive of, risk of cardiovascular disease, cancers, diabetes, and so on. So on top of being useful to assess your fertility potential, it also is a canary in the coal mine. Look, just test your sperm, do it from home, masturbate, easy, right? Put in the kit, ship it back. And then within a couple of days, you kind of can get the all clear, like, hey, things seem pretty good here.
So just building on that, I feel like I heard you say, or something else that I was listening to speak about, is that sperm regenerates every 72 days. So if I do a legacy kit, test my baseline, do you guys ever recommend like a supplementation protocol if the, quality, quantity, et cetera, is like not where, like you say, with supplementation, it could, maybe improve whatever 10%, 15%, and then we'll freeze it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's fairly common, especially for people who are looking to improve their sperm quality. By the way, some people just come to us, they say, hey, I want to freeze my sperm. I don't care about the quality. I just want to have that insurance policy in place. Others will say, hey, I actually want to optimize my sperm. Maybe I'm actually actively trying to have a kid. So we do have a line of supplements right here. You take them for 2.5 months to 3 months. That is about the length of time it takes for the body to produce new sperm. And it makes sense, right? I mean, if I was doing a sperm test and I was thinking about having kids, of course I would want to improve it. Where I will caveat pretty strongly, CoQ10 is pretty clinically validated in the sense of, people feel comfortable recommending it and there being kind of clear outcomes associated with it. Most other supplements are associated with, not necessarily correlated with. So we have a lot of vitamins in here, L-carnitine, selenium, zinc, folate, vitamin E, so on and so forth. These are all things that, this was prepared by our chief medical officer who came up with the formulation. But I always caution people, which is this is all associated with improved semen parameters. CoQ10 is the one thing that I would confidently say to someone, you should absolutely be taking this if you want to improve your sperm quality. And then, of course, similar to how biohacking and the Brian Johnsons of the world are pushing the limit of what is feasible and kind of testing things that maybe are not yet approved by doctors, I think the same is true in the male fertility world. And men seem to be very fixated on how much volume they produce, how far they ejaculate. These are all things that are talked about in the cum stacking subreddit.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can pivot and talk a little bit more about just your story with Legacy. So we know you launched in, I believe, 2018, which literally feels like yesterday, and have since helped.
Before?
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? COVID was 5 years ago.
Crazy. And have since helped thousands of men, whether that's just anyone, regular people, as well as cancer patients, professional athletes, Navy SEALs, just regular Joes.
Yeah.
You've raised, what is it, $50 million from Y Combinator, all of these different other venture. You've received tons of venture-backed funding. I was reading this FT article, I think, that you were quoted in, that says that you have over 30,000 clients, in which more than 100 are Fortune 100 CEOs, and have a master's degree. Would you say that your sperm banks have elite sperm in them? How would you describe that?
Is it for sale?
It is not for sale, not at this time. Not at this time. And certainly we're very careful So for the first 5 years of the business, I said I will never do any sort of sperm donation because I do not want to introduce the concept of commerce when someone is freezing their sperm with us. Is there a world
Commerce.
where we may reach out where we may reach out to existing clients and say, hey, you have great sperm. Would you ever consider donating it?
Yeah.
There's a massive shortage in the United States. From one of our advisors, Dr. Brian Levine at CCRM, and also the founder of Nodal, which is a surrogacy agency. He estimates, I think, about 1,300 active sperm donors for the entire United States, which is a population of 400 million people. Right. And when you break that down, by the way, like let's say you're of a certain ethnic background, right? And you want someone who's of that same ethnic background, you may be talking about 10 or 20 donors, which means that basically everyone from your community who's using a donor, you're all going to have step siblings.
Exactly. Like, I feel like that would be terrible implications for like the future genetic pool if people are like step siblings.
Totally. And yeah, it's like, oh no, stepbrother. And there's such a shortage. So, it's not something we're planning on entering into, but it is something we've toyed with the idea of. Would we ever open up the option to our clients to maybe work with a sperm bank and maybe donate their sperm, and we could kind of be a middleman? That's certainly interesting to us. There's a lot of opportunity there, but in general, I would say I don't use the word elite, but I would say that typically from higher education levels, higher socioeconomic status, and definitely a disproportionately high percentage are either celebrities or, Fortune 500 CEOs who kind of come from those more credentialed backgrounds.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So just taking a step back to 2018, can you tell us a little bit about how did you tell us a little bit about like your startup story, like that first test kit, and how just like the massive growth that you've experienced since then?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday, our first customer, a guy out of Chicago. Unfortunately, I can't share any names. But I remember we had kind of a chat. We have a Slack channel, and we had one Slack channel, which was, orders. And at the time we didn't have any orders, but we had set it up in anticipation. Then we get this order come in, and I turned to the guy next to me. I'm like, wait, do you know this guy? He's like, no. Do you know this guy? I'm like, wait, what? Is this actually just a real customer? Because I assumed it was a friend or a relative, or that was an extraordinary feeling, which was, wow, we actually built a product that someone is willing to buy. That was pretty cool. And this was back. So I did some early fundraising for Legacy. I think I raised maybe, I want to say $130K in funds kind of before starting work on it full time. I had $17,000 in a pension plan in Switzerland that I withdrew and used that. And that was basically my savings. I lived with my mom that summer to reduce expenses. And, we'd go to the grocery store and be like, oh, well, this can of beans is $5. This is $3. Let's make sure we're getting this one. And actually, I loved where we were. It was this little basement unit in Cambridge, very little light, which meant I slept really well. So the first 3 months were really very scrappy in that sense. And I ended up raising a little bit more. All in, I want to say we raised a couple $100K in kind of pre-seed funding. That was enough to get the initial designs, the initial kit, set up the partnerships, and just pay me the bare. And no, I wasn't paid for a while, but just pay contractors and kind of the bare minimum. We got go ahead, Emily. You were going to ask a question.
Oh, I was going to say, like, when you say set up initial partnerships, was your initial model like kind of a D2C situation, or were you partnering with other?
It was, and unlike now where we have our own lab, we have our own storage, we've vertically integrated the business. At the time, we were partnering with a clinic, we were partnering with a cryo storage company. And so, there's a lot of partnership work that I had to do at that time. Our first institutional check was April 2019. That was from Bain Capital Ventures. They wrote us $1 million check. I had never seen commas in a bank account before. That was pretty cool. And I remember we were worried. It's funny thinking back. We were worried that the economy was going to see a huge recession around that time. And I remember I was at one of my best friend's bachelor parties in the Bahamas. And I spent almost the entire trip on my laptop by the beach doing diligence with Bain Capital to make sure that we actually had the funds wired before the economy might collapse. I say that because, it hasn't really happened in the last 5 years, but we had a lot of weird economic movements in the last 5 years. Anyway, a week after we got the money from Bain Capital, we got accepted to Y Combinator. We ended up going and we raised a few $1 million after that summer, which was summer of 2019.
Wow. and then just the rest is history. So you launched kind of like an initial D2C business. Did you tell us about your first campaign? Did you have like a big campaign? Did you go, I was hearing that you were doing stuff with like kind of some of the like dating apps. Maybe you were at South by. Yeah, tell us what worked. Like, was it word of mouth? Was it like social media? Was it like out of home? Yeah, like what was your first campaign?
We have an acronym internally, which is ABP, which is Always Be Planting. It was meant to be kind of a play on Glengarry Glen Ross, ABC, Always Be Closing.
Always be closing.
Nice.
And so for us, it was always be planting a seed that may not take off for years to come. And so we did that in a lot of different areas. First of which, I'll talk about the D2C, then I'll talk about B2B, the business-to-business arm. But the direct-to-consumer arm, we've had a lot of creative campaigns over the years. We did a lot of advertising when we brought on celebrity investors like Justin Bieber and DJ Khaled. We had this little article in the New York Post, which was titled "Bieber's Swimmers Take Gold." And we kind of helped plant that article. So there's a lot of fun we had around that. South by Southwest, we were a big presence for a couple of years. We had a huge booth. We actually had what we call the spermobiles. So there were these little things that can fit two people that they were using to drive people around South by Southwest. And we actually branded them as Legacy. And so we had like sperm all over them with the Legacy ads. We ran some big campaigns, big flashing billboards, 1 in 10 men are infertile, could be you. We've done a lot of press over the years, from the New York Times to the Washington Post to Financial Times. New York Magazine did a big feature on us. So, that's been an area where I definitely think we've done fairly well. We have funded a lot of research and had a lot of collaborations with research institutions to get more publications around the topic of male fertility. We did a big study with Harvard. We've done a number. We actually funded research as well ourselves. So that's one way, because when an article comes out, you then get press around it. We recently helped sponsor the sperm race, which happened in LA a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to ask about that.
Hell yeah, of course we were involved. Come on. We actually had our director of clinical services, Stephanie Sabarine. She flew to to LA. She flew there. She was the person on site interviewing the contestants and turning it in, making it more educational and a little bit more clinical. So kind of infusing facts and figures into the conversation, so it wasn't just a bunch of dick jokes. We also helped them think through educational content and kind of building out their scientific advisory board, because again, you want this all to be science-backed. So we've done things like that. We hosted a Save Our Sperm event here in New York, where we invited, I think it was about 50 or 60 folks, primarily from the press, influencers, men from the military. We were just signing some military contracts at the time. We did, I'll throw in one more. We did a Celebrating the Future of Fatherhood and Parenthood. We hosted this big dinner here in New York. So again, we're also New York is the beating heart of everything consumer, right?
Yeah.
So we've been able to take advantage a lot of being in the city. So it's a very, sorry, I'll add one more thing just because I think it's so interesting. We have been banned so many times. I could go on and on about this. So we've been banned from the New York ferry lines because they didn't like our ads, which used the word sperm, which they found inappropriate and not family friendly, despite the fact that it is the literal technical term for what comes out. We were banned from some locations in Austin that wouldn't let us run our ads. And then one more campaign we did that I thought was super interesting. When we were at the Harvard Innovation Lab in the early days, we were basically on Harvard Business School campus. And in May 2018, that graduation, it rained like crazy. So I thought to myself, for May 2019, I'm going to order 3,000 umbrellas and I'm going to have them Legacy branded and I'm going to give them away. And it was risky because we didn't know if it was going to rain. And so we had these umbrellas made like high-end golf club style, like golf umbrellas, like the big ones. And it just said, we plan for the future so you don't have to. Legacy.
Nice. Iconic.
We handed out every single umbrella. My dad flew to Boston, handed them out with me on Harvard Business School campus until we got shut down by security. They then complained to the incubator saying, your startups are doing stuff that is like not allowed and breaking all these.
Yes. All about the fun guerrilla tactics. Like, do you have any more? Can I get some merch?
You absolutely can. We have caps. I don't know if you can see it. We have sweaters. We have pens. Where's my sperm pen? I definitely have here. We got them.
Oh, of course, it's white.
Question in the vein of research, though, really quickly. Are you also conducting research on what you have in-house? And I don't know if this is something that people sign off on when they give I know you don't want to say samples, but like sperm. Look at that. Do you conduct research on why the sperm quality is declining as well? Like, are you involved in that? So it sounds like, okay, sperm counts overall are declining, quality is declining. Like, are you looking into that at all, or is that just kind of like a byproduct of our
It's a
environment?
little bit out of our purview. There's
Yeah.
Dr. Shauna Swan, who is the author of a book called Countdown. Fun fact, we're actually in the book. That she's probably the preeminent researcher on this topic right now, or certainly one of the most popular. She was on Joe Rogan's podcast not too long ago. She does a lot of this type of research. It's a little bit out of the purview of what we do as a business. For us, we want to understand what's your quality like today,
Yeah.
and what can you do to improve it, and then how can we preserve it for you for the future.
Interesting. Yeah, definitely I definitely want to read more about your research that you've done with Harvard as well. That's really cool. Okay, just really quickly. So first you were D2C, and then you scaled that into where you parlayed that into like more of a B2B play. Are you finding that it's just as easy to get that fertility benefit from employers as it is for egg freezing? Like, is it kind of like 1-to-1, or do you feel like that's required more education? I would like kind of from the employer benefit level.
I have a lot of thoughts on that, so I'll try to be sequential about it. B2B is now a significant minority of my business. It's about 40% of the business today. It's grown a lot over the past few years. And that is in part because D2C consumer health is dead.
Yeah.
That pathway that Roman and Hims followed to become multi-billion-dollar businesses, they burned the pathway along the way. Not deliberately, but just it became too expensive and no one was able to replicate it. They had that insight early on. They were able to do it. And then 1,000 other companies tried to do it. I felt that from pretty early on, which is why we were doing the ABP and planting, these, like investing in these relationships with companies that offer fertility benefits, with the insurers, with military and so on, that now are a pretty significant chunk of the business. It's definitely not easy, and you run into all kinds of strange issues. Like if you're going to an employer with a male fertility benefit, they're like, great, well, I can't offer a benefit just to one side of the equation. It also helps us on the other side, which is employers saying, hey, we offer female fertility benefits. Why aren't we offering male fertility benefits? So it works both ways, but definitely there continues to be a higher level of education necessary for men to learn about this, be aware of this, and ultimately act on this. And we found with a lot of men, it's not just about price. I mean, men are actually willing to pay quite a lot of money for this. It's really just about reaching that point where you say, damn, I really should be doing this. This is an obvious no-brainer. I should be doing this.
I think we're going to turn to some of our listener questions.
I have a question on collection. You mentioned it's at home, right?
Correct.
I guess I struggle with the energetics of masturbation, especially stimuli are often like pornography versus partner.
Doing it alone versus with a partner.
Yeah. Is there any guideline for partner interaction that doesn't compromise the sample?
Yeah, totally fine. There's a couple rules. No condoms, no lubricants, no saliva. Basically nothing that can interfere with the sample or introduce any bacteria.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, if your partner's helping you and you're doing it without the aid of any lubricants, no issues with that as long as they've washed their hands.
Okay. So dry touching.
I think Andrew Schultz called it the dry rub.
For sure.
And there has been no evidence that I've seen to suggest that doing it solo would have any different parameters than doing it with a partner or having, partner assisted. I will say there are studies showing that collecting your sperm sample at home versus at a clinic actually tends to be higher quality because you're more comfortable, you're not stressed, you're not rushed, you're kind of, watching whatever you like and doing it however you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to, I feel like there's this overall revolution in the health space of from hospital to hospitality. And we're seeing it in some places, but as you were describing your story at the beginning, it's one of those scenarios, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be anywhere near in that room. Make it nice. Otherwise, I'm staying home.
Yeah, exactly. If given the chance to masturbate at home, I will always choose that. And that's just in my personal life.
I think there was one thing, before I get to the questions, there was one thing that you've mentioned before. I listened to maybe 4 hours of your podcast.
Oh my God.
And you've
Oh my
mentioned
God.
this
Why would you do
before.
that to yourself? You have GPT for a reason, girl.
Yeah, no, I use ChatGPT for other things and not to, I don't like to
You're a masochist.
dull my
Got it.
own brain. Yeah. Anyway, but you were mentioning the whole like heat thing. And I think when we look at a lot of the longevity recommendations like sauna and heat and like cold plunges, all that stuff is like often touted as the pinnacle of health and wellness.
Yeah.
And you're very much like a nay on heat. Could you talk about that more or explain like your rationale there?
So I want everyone to imagine a pair of testicles.
I'm with you.
Right. Why do the testicles hang from the body? Why are they not attached to the body in the same way?
It's cooler.
And the reason for that is it is the hanging that allows it to be at slightly below body temperature. Heat is bad for spermatogenesis, or the production of sperm. So actually, anything that introduces heat to your scrotum or to your genital area is actually bad for sperm production. So that can be everything. That can be like literal stuff, like you have your laptop on your lap. That can be you're in a warmer climate. That can be that you are exposing yourself to sauna, these hot spas and so on. Cold plunge, by the way, should be fine. But all of those can damage sperm. I think it has many, many health benefits, but sperm quality will not be one of them.
Should we be breaking out the ice diaper? The Brian Johnson ice
I
diaper?
saw those videos. Yeah.
The each his own. Each his own. Look, it is one way of solving that, right? It is one way, or I don't know if he's solving it, but it is one way of addressing it.
For the summer.
But it is one of those things where people may think it's good for you, but actually it's bad in some ways. Testosterone is a great one. So a lot of men these days are on TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy. What they don't know is that the way the body works, when you take exogenous TRT, your body shuts down sperm production. So actually your sperm count drops to 0, which for some men in the cum stacking subreddit and others, may actually be a positive. Some of them actually want to have worse sperm count. And for many others, it's very surprising. We found that we ran a nationally representative survey, I think, of thousands of people in the United States, and we found that 73% of them thought that taking TRT would improve your sperm quality, which intuitively makes sense, by the way, right? Like, you're more of a man. Like, why wouldn't your sperm quality be better? Nope. Total opposite. Sperm count goes down to 0, and there's a chance it can permanently impair or hinder your fertility.
Yeah, too much of a good thing is never good.
Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Including moderation. So with that, we've got 3 minutes. So I'm going to ask 3 questions from our board of dudes.
Let's go.
I think you saw some of these on Twitter already because you engaged with the tweet. But one question is from No Beer January, and he wants to know whether them want to know whether you entered your sperm in that sperm speed race competition.
No, because we all know I'd win.
I just want to say 4 different people asked this question, including one woman. So it was the hottest topic for sure.
Love it.
We also had a question from actually a female listener, and she wanted to know whether you could share a bit of the impact that sperm might have on the baby and fertility and a woman's pregnancy experience.
Huge impact. Whoever asked that question, shout out. It's a great one. Fertility is a 50-50 issue. You have a healthy baby with a healthy sperm and a healthy egg. So, when you have advanced maternal age, i.e. an older father, you have more DNA damage. Sperm quality has gone down. So actually, you're more likely to have a miscarriage. You're more likely to be infertile altogether. And then your child is more likely to have issues like autism spectrum disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and so on. And this is on top of increased risk to the mother, who's more likely to develop gestational diabetes, as well as other risks to the baby, like just having a lower APGAR score, which is kind of an assessment of your baby's health, and other factors like low birth weight.
Okay, one last question, and this is from Austin. And the question is, I'm curious about equity/accessibility in fertility services and how you see sperm in the ecosystem as a whole. Having children is becoming a luxury good, with cost of childcare, egg freezing, IVF, etc., becoming prohibitively expensive.
Austin, I cannot possibly disagree with you more. This is the worst question I've heard in my life. I'm kidding. It's a good question. He's just wrong. He's right about childcare, egg freezing, and IVF, but actually sperm is extraordinarily cheap with us to freeze. It costs us about $100 to $150 a year to freeze. And we
Wow.
have some packages where you can prepay that are effectively $50 a year to freeze, if not less.
Whoa.
I mean, $50 a year, what is that? $4 a month,
Yeah.
right? To know that you will be able to have children in the future. This is actually the one piece of the puzzle that is prohibitively inexpensive or unprohibitive, whatever. It's cheap.
It's cheap.
It's cheap.
Okay, that's good to know. I feel like
Yeah, I had that misconception that it was
me
also
too.
expensive.
I mean, it is at a traditional clinic where you're paying $500 to $1,000 a year for freezing, and you may pay $500 or more for the semen analysis. For us, you're paying a couple $100 up front. It may be covered by your employer or by your insurance, and then you're paying $100 to $150 a year for freezing.
No brainer.
It's a no-brainer. So to all the men listening out there, send us your sperm.
send us a sample.
Send us a sample.
Well, I think on that note, everyone send Legacy your sperm. I'll just kind of really quickly wrap us up. I think by now everyone understands that male fertility is a crucial aspect of reproductive health, and it deserves a lot more open conversation. Khaled, we're so grateful that you were able to join us today. You and Legacy are really leading this movement and really providing accessible, as you just pointed out, solutions and really challenging outdated stigmas. So whether you're planning for the future or simply curious, understanding and monitoring and freezing your sperm is a step forward. So send everyone your sperm.
Couldn't agree more. Find us at givelegacy.com. You can follow us on Instagram. We're Give Legacy Inc. Any questions you have, we have a client services team ready to answer. Client services at givelegacy.com. And if you want to find me, you can go to spermking.com. Redirect you to my LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Hey, thank you so much for
Thank you so
joining us today.
much.
This was great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Bye.